Nancy Pelosi may have just ended her own career, and it all happened on live television. She marched into Congress, armed with what she claimed was evidence against Tulsi Gabbard, only to be exposed in the most mortifying way imaginable. A traitor. Putin's puppet. That's what Pelosi yelled, brandishing a manila folder as if it were a weapon. Her supporters chanted along, broadcasting the scene live to millions of viewers. And then she delivered the bombshell. "I have here," she declared, "saw documented proof of Russian financial transfers, $500,000, straight from Moscow." But hold on, Tulsi Gabbard just sat there, military straight and perfectly calm, as if she knew something Nancy didn't. "Zoom in on the account number," Tulsi said. What happened next is truly shocking. The evidence was a complete fake. It was photoshopped. You could see the pixels were misaligned. The fonts didn't even match. The actual transaction was for just $500, a birthday gift from Tulsi's aunt in Hawaii. But this is where the story takes an insane turn. The cameras then captured something that nobody saw coming. Tulsi was sitting right there with several folders spread out neatly in front of her, and every single one had a label that seemed to make the color drain from Nancy Pelosi's face. "Was it your staff, or was it you?" Tulsi calmly asked. "Because, as you know, falsifying evidence in Congress is a felony." Then, so she uttered the words that would change everything. "You want to talk about corruption? Let's begin with your husband's seemingly miraculous gift for predicting the future. What exactly was in those folders, and why did Nancy suddenly start to tremble? The truth is far more devastating than you could ever imagine. You see, this decorated combat veteran had come prepared. She wasn't there just to defend herself. She was there to go on the attack. She opened the first folder, revealing a meticulously organized timeline. Every page was tabbed with color-coded markers, hinting at months of careful investigation. With the precision of a surgeon selecting a scalpel, Tulsi pulled out the first document, holding up a simple chart for the cameras that told a very complex story of corruption. "Paul Pelosi," she began, her voice carrying the steady, measured tone of a military briefing. "Your husband of 61 years is, by all accounts, a successful businessman. But his success rate in stock trading defies not just the odds, but the very laws of probability. Even Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha, only maintains about a 72% success rate on his trades. Your husband's is 96%. She then produced a series of trading records, each one clearly time-stamped and authenticated. Let's take a look at some of his most prescient investments. July 2021. Mr. I. Pelosi purchases $5 million in NVIDIA call options. Just 48 hours later, you announce congressional support for the CHIPS Act, which specifically benefits NVIDIA. The stock soars. His profit, a cool $5.3 million in just 6 weeks. Pelosi shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her hand instinctively moving toward her microphone. "My husband is simply a talented investor." "Talented?" Tulsi cut in smoothly. "Let's continue, shall we?" March 2022. Mr. Pelosi shorts Tesla stock, selling off $3 million worth. The very next day, you hold a closed-door meeting with EPA officials regarding an investigation into Tesla's environmental claims. The stock plummets 12%. His profit, $380,000 in a single 24-hour period. She continued to pull out more documents, laying them out one by one like evidence in a high-stakes court case. September 2022. Microsoft call options are worth $8 million. This was 2 days before the Pentagon announces a major contract that, surprise, surprise, Microsoft wins for a profit of $24 million. But this, Tulsi continued, is where it gets really interesting. Tulsi then pulled out her phone. What committee did you meet with this morning, Madam Speaker? Pelosi's eyes narrowed suspiciously. Oh, the Armed Services Committee. It was a classified briefing on defense readiness. What does that have to... What time did that briefing end? About an hour ago, she replied. But I failed to see the relevance. That's when Tulsi turned her phone toward the cameras and the massive screens in the hearing room. This, she announced, is a real-time trading platform, and this is specifically your husband's account. And yes, the account numbers are a matter of public record, thanks to his required disclosures. Now let's see what trades were made within the last hour. On the screen, for everyone to see, it showed clear as day. At 11:47 a.m., the exact time the Armed Services Committee would have been discussing defense contractors, Paul Pelosi had purchased $3 million in Lockheed Martin call options. The timestamp was absolutely damning. He was, quite literally, making trades while his wife was sitting in classified government briefings. The entire hearing room erupted into chaos. Reporters were scrambling to their feet. Even some of Pelosi's own supporters looked visibly shocked. The real-time nature of this evidence was simply undeniable. That's impossible, Pelosi stammered. He couldn't have known, she said, to which Tulsi pressed, couldn't have known what? What could possibly have been discussed in that classified briefing that would make Lockheed Martin such a good buy? Unless, of course, someone told him, someone who was actually in that briefing. She then produced a completely new set of documents, and these ones bore an official FBI letterhead. These, she stated, are text messages between you and your husband, obtained under a federal warrant as part of an ongoing insider trading investigation. Would you like me to read them out loud for everyone? And without even waiting for an answer, Tulsi began to read. Nancy to Paul. June 15th to 2021. TSLA going down tomorrow. EPA announcement. Paul to Nancy. How much? Nancy, big. Sell everything. Then another. Nancy to Paul. August 3rd, 2022. Buy NVDA now. Committee is approving the subsidies tomorrow. Paul, how much? Nancy replied, $10 million worth. Trust me, it's my personal favorite. Tulsi continued reading. A message from Nancy to Paul. Dated December 10th, 2022. It was sent from inside a SCIF. That's a sensitive compartmented information facility, a secure room where phones are strictly forbidden. The message read, Defense budget passing with Lockheed provision intact. Buy. She looked up from the messages. Sending classified information from a SCIF is a federal crime. Using that information for stock trades, that's insider trading. And doing it repeatedly for decades, that's racketeering. But wait, Tulsi said, producing another document. It gets better. Or worse, depending on your perspective. This is an affidavit from James Morrison, your husband's former stockbroker. He's now cooperating with federal authorities in exchange for immunity. Would you like to know what Mr. Morrison had to say about your husband's trading instructions? The affidavit was devastating in its simplicity. It stated that Mr. Pelosi would call with specific trades, always with an absolute certainty about the timing. He would say things like, my wife says this is guaranteed, or Nancy knows something big is coming. Morrison added, I recorded several of these calls for my own protection." "He recorded the calls," Tulsi repeated, pulling out a small digital player. "Shall we listen?" The audio was crystal clear. It was Paul Pelosi's voice. "Jim, I need you to buy everything you can in CrowdStrike. Everything." Morrison's voice is heard next. "That's a big position, Paul. Are you sure about this?" Paul replies, "Nancy just left a cybersecurity briefing. They're getting a federal contract, announcements on Monday." Morrison hesitates. "Paul, that sounds like—" Paul cuts him off. "Like making money. Just do it." The total profit from that single trade? Tulsi noted it was $4.7 million, all in just 1 week. She then pulled out a comprehensive financial analysis. It showed that over the past 15 years, Paul Pelosi had made roughly $140 million in stock trades, with a success rate that would be impossible without inside information. He had turned a portfolio worth $5 million into one worth over $140 million. And all of this happened while his wife, coincidentally, sat on the very committees overseeing every single industry he invested in. "But here's the most damning evidence," Tulsi said, producing a thick folder marked with FBI seals. "Federal Investigation Number SF-2024, II-234. 3 of your former staffers have already agreed to cooperate in exchange for immunity. They've described a system where you would call your husband from the Capitol, sometimes from within secure facilities, to share classified or committee confidential information." She then pulled out one particularly damning piece of evidence. "This is from your former scheduler, Maria Chen. She testifies that you would regularly step out of classified briefings to make calls to your husband. She once heard you say, and I quote, 'Paul, buy defense stocks now. Big announcement coming.' That call was made the day before the Afghanistan withdrawal announcement, which sent defense stocks soaring. The evidence kept coming, as relentless as waves against a crumbling seawall. And there were phone records showing calls from Pelosi to her husband immediately following committee meetings. Then there were trading records showing purchases made within minutes of those very calls. It was a clear pattern of corruption that spanned decades. $140 million, Tulsi repeated, made not through a brilliant investment strategy, but through the systematic violation of insider trading laws. You've turned the United States Congress into your personal stock tip service. You've turned classified briefings into profit opportunities, and your oath of office into a complete joke." Pelosi's lawyer was whispering urgently in her ear, but she just waved him away. "These are fabrications, a political hit job," she snapped. "I've served this country with honor." "Honor?" Tulsi interrupted. "Is it honorable to use information about military operations to profit in the stock market? Is it honorable to trade on classified briefings while American soldiers are facing the consequences of those very policies? Is it honorable to make millions while your own constituents struggle just to afford groceries?" She closed the first folder with a deliberate final clap. The FBI doesn't think so. The SEC doesn't think so. And based on the reactions in this room, the American people don't think so either." Tulsi then reached for a second folder. "But insider trading is just personal corruption," she stated. "What's in here? This is about turning your entire family into a criminal enterprise." The second folder was thicker than the first, bulging with corporate documents, travel records, and financial statements that painted a picture of systematic family corruption, spanning generations. Tulsi opened it with the methodical precision of someone revealing a carefully constructed house of cards. Each document was another card, and when removed, it would bring the entire structure crashing down. Let's talk about Paul Pelosi Jr., she began, extracting a corporate prospectus with his photo displayed prominently. Your son. No business experience to speak of. No relevant education. Yet somehow he's been on the boards of multiple companies that just happen to benefit from your legislative actions. She laid out a timeline where names and dates were clearly marked. In 2009, Paul Jr. joined the board of InfoUSA, a data mining company. His qualification? Being your son. His salary was $180,000 a year for attending just 4 meetings. Coincidentally, InfoUSA then received federal contracts worth $20 million. You're right after you advocated for increased government data collection. My son is a talented businessman, Pelosi began, but her voice lacked any real conviction. Is he? Tulsi retorted, pulling out a set of travel records. Let's examine that talent. In 2014, you led an official congressional delegation to Ukraine. Paul Jr. wasn't part of the official delegation, and yet he was on the plane. Why? Because immediately following your meetings with Ukrainian energy officials, he was appointed to the board of Visco, a Ukrainian energy company. His salary was $500,000 a year. She then displayed photos from the trip. Pelosi was in official meetings, while Paul Jr. could be seen in the background, clearly part of discussions he had no official reason to be in. But here's where it gets interesting, Tulsi continued, gesturing over to the gallery. Paul Jr. is here today, right there in the 3rd row. Paul, would you like to explain to the committee how you got that position? What energy expertise did you have? All eyes turned to Paul Pelosi Jr., a man in his 50s who suddenly looked much younger, like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. His face flushed red as he shifted uncomfortably in his seat. My experience was, he stammered. Then his voice grew stronger, becoming defensive. So Mom said it was standard practice. Everyone does it. The words hung in the air like a raw admission of guilt. Pelosi reached out toward her son, her voice cracking as she spoke. Paul, honey, you don't have to. But Paul Jr. was already standing up, his face a mask of sudden realization. You told me it was legal. You said this was how Washington worked. He looked all around the room, seeing the cameras and the shocked faces, understanding, perhaps for the very first time, the magnitude of what had been done. I need to leave. I need to... He pushed past the other spectators, fleeing toward the exit. The cameras caught every single moment of the speaker's son abandoning her as the truth came pouring out. Pelosi's microphone picked up her desperate whisper. Paul, please wait. But he was gone, leaving only the echo of his confession behind. Mom said it was standard practice. Tulsi waited for the chaos to subside before she continued, her voice carrying a note of genuine sadness. Your son just realized what you've done to him. You've made him complicit in your corruption. But he's not the only family member you've enriched, is he? She pulled out a diagram that looked like something from a mafia investigation, with boxes and lines showing the flow of money and influence through the Pelosi family tree. Your nephew, Gavin Newsom, she continued, pointing to connections on the chart. He was appointed to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors with your backing, later became mayor, and is now governor. And, coincidentally, every step of his career has been accompanied by Pelosi family real estate deals in areas that were about to be rezoned or redeveloped. The evidence was meticulous. In 2003, the Pelosi family purchased warehouses in Mission Bay for $3 million. In 2004, Gavin Newsom, as mayor, announced a major redevelopment of Mission Bay. In 2008, the Pelosi family sold those same properties for $28 million. That's a profit of $25 million. In 2011, the Pelosi family bought office buildings in downtown Oakland. In 2012, federal transportation funds that you had secured were announced for an Oakland transit hub. In 2015, those properties were sold for triple their original purchase price. But it's not just real estate, Tulsi continued, producing a stack of government contracts. So your brother-in-law received $7 million in federal contracts for construction projects. Your nephew by marriage got $15 million in solar energy grants. And your grandchildren, yes, your grandchildren, have received consulting fees from companies seeking federal contracts. She pulled out a set of incorporation documents. Pelosi Family, LLC, Pelosi Investments Trust, Pelosi Real Estate Holdings. It was shell company after shell company, all of them designed to funnel money from those seeking influence to those who have it. The total family enrichment that we can document is over $200 million. But here's the recording that truly shows the system, Tulsi said, producing another audio device. This is from your housekeeper, who felt guilty about staying silent. She recorded a family dinner because she was worried about being blamed for some missing items. What she caught instead, was a confession. The audio played, a little muffled, but clear enough to make out. It was Nancy Pelosi's voice. I've spent 30 years making sure this family is taken care of. Every vote, every connection, every piece of inside information, it's all for you. An unknown family member then asked, "But Nancy, is it legal?" Nancy replied, "I make the laws. I decide what's legal. Just set up the LLCs like I taught you. Never put anything in your own names. Always use the trusts." Then another voice asked, "How much should we invest in the green energy stocks?" Nancy's voice answered, "Everything you can." The climate bill passes next month. We're talking about a minimum of 300% returns. The recording went on to detail insider information, investment strategies, and how to hide all the connections. It was a master class in corruption served over dinner, like a family recipe being passed down through generations. $200 million, Tulsi repeated, not earned through innovation or hard work, but through the systematic abuse of your position. You've turned public service into a family business, and that business is corruption. She pulled out one last document from that section, a photo lineup of Pelosi family members. And every single person in these photos has profited financially from your position. Every last one. You've built a dynasty, not of public service, but of public theft. Pelosi's lawyer was now actively trying to get her to leave, even pulling at her arm, but she seemed completely frozen, watching her carefully built empire crumble in real time. Your son fled because he finally understood, Tulsi said quietly. He's not a successful businessman. He's a beneficiary of corruption, and deep down, he has always known it. That's what you've done to your family, made them all complicit in your crimes. She closed the second folder and reached for the third. But family corruption is almost quaint compared to this, because what's in here isn't just about money, it's about treason. The third folder had red classification markings that were crossed through with declassification stamps, suggesting the information had been recently released just for this hearing. Tulsi opened it with the weight of someone handling state secrets, which, in a way, she was. The documents inside didn't just speak of corruption, but of a betrayal so profound it had put American strategic interests and potentially the lives of service members at risk. August 2022. Tulsi began, her voice taking on a harder edge. You took a highly publicized trip to Taiwan, going against the explicit warnings of the Defense Department, the State Department, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. You called it standing up for democracy, but that's not why you went, is it? She produced a classified briefing document with key sections highlighted. This is the security assessment they gave you before the trip. It explicitly warns that your visit would escalate tensions, compromise ongoing intelligence operations, and potentially expose our defensive positions. You were literally told that American lives could be put at risk. I went to support our Democratic allies, Pelosi interjected, but her voice lacked its usual force. Did you? Tulsi pulled out flight manifests and meeting schedules, because your official schedule shows meetings with Taiwan's president and legislature. But the actual records tell a different story. 24 hours in Taiwan, only 6 hours of official meetings. So where were you for the other 18 hours? She held up surveillance photos, obviously taken from a distance, but unmistakable in what they showed. These are from TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, the most important chip manufacturer in the world. You spent 12 hours there, in meetings that don't appear anywhere on your official schedule. Meetings that even your own security detail wasn't allowed to attend. But here's where it gets interesting, Tulsi continued, pulling out a thick folder of financial records. 2 days before your Taiwan trip, Paul Pelosi buys $8 million in semiconductor stocks. Not just any semiconductor stocks, but specifically companies that would benefit if TSMC announced an expansion into the United States, which, coincidentally, is exactly what you talked about in those secret meetings. The evidence that followed was damningly specific. Trading records revealed massive purchases across the entire semiconductor sector. On email communications between Paul Pelosi and his brokers discussed your Taiwan information. Bank records showed a profit of $5 million in just 10 days. But you didn't just insider trade on this trip, Tulsi said, her voice growing colder. You compromised national security, and we have the proof. She pulled out a tablet and connected it to the hearing room's display screens. What you're about to see is security footage from inside TSMC headquarters. It was provided by Taiwanese intelligence as part of a joint investigation into Chinese espionage. They didn't realize what else it would reveal. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. It showed Pelosi in a conference room with TSMC executives. The audio had been enhanced, and despite some static, the conversation was audible. To Pelosi's voice, "My husband needs certainty before making investments of this size." A TSMC executive. "Madam Speaker, this is highly sensitive information." Pelosi, "I'm going to help secure $50 billion in subsidies for your U.S. operations. I think that buys us some transparency." The executive, "The new Arizona facility will be announced next month." Pelosi, "Production capacity will be—" I need specifics. So, which chips? And what's the timeline? My husband is prepared to invest heavily, but he's going to need guarantees. Another executive spoke. "This feels inappropriate, Madam Speaker." "I'll remember that when the funding bills come up," Pelosi replied. "Now, about the timeline." The video went on, showing Pelosi extracting specific details about production plans, technology transfers, and even defensive measures around the TSMC facilities. She could be seen taking notes, photographing documents, and at one point accepting a USB drive from an executive. That USB drive, Tulsi said, producing a forensic report, contained detailed technical specifications for next-generation chip manufacturing. This was information that would be invaluable to any nation trying to replicate TSMC's capabilities. It's information that a member of Congress has no legitimate reason to be in possession of. She pulled out intelligence reports, partially blacked out, and but damning in what they implied. 3 weeks after your visit, Chinese intelligence began showing an unusual interest in specific TSMC technologies, the exact ones detailed in the files you received. Is that a coincidence, or did someone share that information? How dare you suggest, Pelosi began, but Tulsi cut her off with the evidence. These are text messages between you and your husband during the Taiwan trip, she said, reading from authenticated records. Nancy to Paul. By everything Taiwan-related. This is bigger than we thought. Paul back to Nancy. How much, Nancy? Everything we can leverage. Mortgage the houses if needed. Paul's reply, that's insider. Nancy, it's insider information that will make us rich. Do it. But the most damaging evidence was yet to come. Tulsi produced a document marked with Department of Defense seals. This is from General Mark Matthews, Commander of U.S. Forces in the Pacific. He states that during your Taiwan visit, you insisted on being briefed on defensive positions around the island. You were shown classified military installations. You were told about rapid response protocols. She pulled out another intelligence report. 2 months later, the Chinese military exercises showed unusual precision in avoiding these exact defensive positions. They knew exactly where our assets were. They knew our response times. They knew because someone told them. A figure in a military uniform stood up in the gallery. I'm Colonel James Morrison, Defense Intelligence Agency. My team traced the leak. It came from documents that were only shown to one unauthorized person, Speaker Pelosi. The hearing room erupted. This wasn't just corruption anymore. This was treason. Pelosi's face had gone from pale to an ashen gray. You endangered American service members for semiconductor stocks, Tulsi said, her voice carrying the controlled fury of a soldier who had seen friends die. You sold classified information, whether to the Chinese or just to the highest bidder. We're still determining. But what we know for certain is that you turned a diplomatic mission into a money-making scheme and compromised national security in the process. She produced bank records showing the massive profits from the semiconductor trades, $50 million. That's what you and your husband made from information gathered on that trip. $50 million earned by betraying your country's secrets and endangering its defenders. But here's the final piece of evidence, Tulsi said, pulling out a document that made several committee members gasp. This is a FISA warrant, unauthorized last month. It allowed surveillance of your communications due to suspected espionage. And what did they find? She produced transcripts of recent calls. You've been in regular contact with individuals now identified as Chinese intelligence assets, discussing your investments, and sharing insights about upcoming legislation. You've been functioning as an unregistered foreign agent while serving as Speaker of the House. The weight of the revelations was crushing, and this wasn't just political corruption. This was a betrayal of the highest order. Pelosi sat frozen, her political career of 3 decades crumbling in minutes. You called me a traitor, Tulsi said quietly. You said I was a foreign asset. That's classic projection. Because the real foreign asset has been sitting in the Speaker's chair, selling America's secrets for stock tips. She closed the folder and reached for the 4th one. But treason for profit is at least something you can comprehend. What's in here? This is about pure hypocrisy, about destroying lives while living in luxury, about the rules you imposed on others while exempting yourself. The fourth folder contained photographs and documents that seemed more personal than the financial crimes previously exposed, yet they were somehow more damaging in their revelation of her character. See, Tulsi opened it with an expression that suggested she found this particular hypocrisy especially distasteful, perhaps because it dealt not with abstract financial crimes, but with the very real suffering of ordinary people. March 2020. She started by revealing a timeline, each red X marking a death, a shuttered business, a shattered dream. San Francisco had imposed the nation's harshest lockdown, banning gatherings, closing non-essential businesses, and even forbidding salon visits. And these were orders that you publicly championed, praised, and demanded be enforced with the full force of the law. Next, she presented a police report. It detailed the story of Maria Santos, a single mother of 3, who was arrested simply for trying to keep her restaurant open to feed her family. She was fined $10,000 she didn't have, lost her business, and then lost her home. Just one of thousands of similar stories from your district. But while Maria was losing everything, Tulsi pressed on. You're bringing up surveillance footage complete with timestamps. It seems you had a very different lockdown experience. These, she said, are security camera records from your own San Francisco neighborhood. Every Tuesday and Friday, the same car would pull up to your house. Do you want to guess whose car it was? The answer appeared on the screen. Clear footage revealed a woman entering Pelosi's home through a side door, carrying what was unmistakably hairdressing equipment. "Oh, her name is Erica Cuse," Tulsi announced, pointing toward the gallery where a woman in her 50s sat, tears already welling in her eyes. "She's the owner of eSalon, the very salon you forced to shut down, the salon that ultimately went bankrupt, and the salon whose owner you destroyed after she exposed your hypocrisy." Erica Cuse then stood up slowly, her voice trembling with years of bottled-up anger and pain. "She came every single week while I was going bankrupt. While my stylists were forced to apply for food stamps. All the while, she was getting her hair done. When I finally decided to speak up, she absolutely destroyed me. She had the city government come after my licenses. She even had her supporters threaten my family. I lost everything, all because I told the truth about Nancy Pelosi." The woman then pulled out a foreclosure notice, holding it high with trembling hands. "My salon, which I owned for 20 years, had gone. Gone? My home was gone. And my savings were gone. All while she was getting her weekly blowout and telling the rest of us to sacrifice for the greater good." "Thank you for your courage, Miss Cuse," Tulsi said gently, before turning her attention back to the evidence. But the salon visits, it turned out, were just the beginning. Now, let's talk about the parties. She then displayed a series of photographs that looked like they were torn from the pages of a high society magazine. Elegant gatherings with champagne flowing freely, and clearly, no social distancing in sight. "Your home security system, you see, I uploads to the cloud. And your husband gave the FBI access as part of his cooperation agreement. These photos were taken at your house during the most restrictive lockdown periods. The photos showed gatherings with dozens of people in attendance. There were political donors, family members, and business associates all mingling freely while the rest of San Francisco was forced to cower in isolation." "Let's look at August 2020, Tulsi read from a prepared report. "While funerals were limited to just 10 people, while children were barred from visiting their dying grandparents, and while depression and suicide rates skyrocketed from isolation, you hosted a fundraiser for 40 people. There were no masks, no distancing, and a full catering staff on hand. Then she pulled out even more evidence. In September 2020, you publicly attacked a salon owner for just wanting to feed her family. Oh, and then you hosted a wine tasting for Democratic donors. Then came October 2020. You demanded that schools stay closed, all while hosting a Halloween party with over 60 guests. But the parties were just personal hypocrisy, Tulsi continued, her voice hardening. This is where it crosses the line into criminal activity, according to property records from 2020 and 2021. While your own constituents were losing their businesses, you were busy buying them up. The documents she presented revealed a very clear pattern. In April of 2020, you purchased a restaurant building in North Beach. The price was $2.3 million. Its previous owner had gone bankrupt because of the lockdowns. Next, in June of 2020, you bought a retail complex in the Mission District. The price tag was $4.7 million. The seller was desperate, facing complete foreclosure. Then, in August 2020, you acquired 3 more properties, all from owners who were financially destroyed by the lockdowns. The total value of property you acquired during the COVID lockdowns was a staggering $47 million, and the average discount you received from pre-COVID prices was 65%. You made a fortune by buying up the broken dreams of your own constituents. She then pulled up text messages between Pelosi and her real estate advisor. Nancy, find me more of these distressed properties. This opportunity won't last forever. The advisor writes back, there's a family bakery in Chinatown. It's a third-generation business, and they're about to fold. Nancy's response was, perfect. Offer them 30 cents on the dollar. I'm sure they'll take it. That's a $50 million profit, Tulsi calculated aloud. A profit made by imposing rules that destroyed small businesses, and then buying up those same businesses when the desperate owners had no other choice. You didn't just profit from the pandemic, you actively engineered the very circumstances that made that profit possible. She then presented one final piece of evidence for this section, a video from a security camera. This footage is from November 2020. The location is the French Laundry restaurant. While you were telling American families they couldn't gather for Thanksgiving, you were attending a birthday party for a prominent lobbyist. Again, no masks, no distancing, just pure hypocrisy. But this video showed much more than just the party. It caught Pelosi in a candid conversation with other attendees. This lockdown, she's heard saying, has been the best thing for real estate prices in decades. We're buying up everything we can. These small business owners are just desperate. They'll sell for practically anything. Give it another 6 months, and we'll own half of San Francisco. The casual way she talked about profiting from all this suffering was chilling. Everyone in the room watched as a woman laid out her plan to get rich off the very misery she was helping to create. You want to see what let them eat cake looks like in the 21st century? Tulsi asked, revealing one last image. This is you, showing off your $24,000 freezer packed with gourmet ice cream, while your own constituents were lining up at food banks. This is you, getting weekly salon treatments while the salon owners themselves were going bankrupt. And this is you, hosting parties while telling grieving families they weren't allowed to hold funerals. By now, Erica Kios was openly weeping, and she was not alone. Others in the gallery, restaurant owners, small business proprietors, people who had lost absolutely everything, stood in solidarity with her. The rules were for them, not for you, Tulsi concluded. The sacrifices were theirs to make, and the profits were yours to take. You turned a pandemic into a personal get-rich-quick scheme, all while hiding behind the flag of public health. Then, she closed the folder and reached for the fifth one. But at least during COVID, you occasionally visited the district you were actively destroying. What's in this folder shows you've abandoned it completely. It shows that the people you claim to represent haven't even seen you in years. The fifth folder had photographs on its cover. When these weren't the polished political photos from campaigns and victory nights, but instead stark images of urban decay. Tent cities stretching beneath freeway overpasses, boarded-up storefronts with for-lease signs yellowed by time, and human waste on sidewalks where children once played. This was San Francisco's congressional district, and Tulsi opened the folder with the solemn air of someone documenting a tragedy. You've represented San Francisco in Congress for 36 years, she started, pulling out a map covered in red dots. These dots represent every single public appearance you've made in your district in the last 5 years. Would you like to count them with me? It won't take long. There are 7. Just 7 appearances in 5 years. And all 7 of them were fundraisers in Pacific Heights, the wealthy enclave that barely resembles the rest of your district. And she then produced attendance records, or rather, the complete absence of them. Town halls held in the last 5 years? 0. Community meetings attended? 0. Office hours for your constituents? 0. And your district office on Fillmore Street? Let's talk about that. The photograph she held up showed a building with a Pelosi district office sign, but something was clearly off. The windows were all covered with paper. The entrance showed absolutely no signs of regular use. Our investigators visited 17 times over 3 months, at all different hours, on different days. It was closed every single time. Your staff, whenever we could finally reach them, claimed you were in meetings. But where do you really spend your time? Tulsi continued, now producing property records. You own 6 properties. Let's see where they are. A Pacific Heights mansion, $15 million. A Napa Valley estate, $25 million. A Georgetown house, $8 million. A Florida beach house, $6 million. And rental properties in San Francisco, another $20 million. Notice what's missing from that list? There's not a single property in the neighborhoods where your actual constituents live. She pulled out travel records, obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests. In the last year, you've spent 47 days in Napa at your vineyard estate, 23 days in Florida, and 186 days in Washington, mostly at your Georgetown home. And the number of days spent in your actual district, not counting the airport? 12. And every one of those days was spent either in Pacific Heights or at a fundraiser. But surely your constituents can reach you in other ways, Tulsi said with mock innocence. Let's hear from some of them. She then gestured to the gallery, where a group of people had been sitting quietly, waiting for this moment. And these weren't the polished political operatives you usually see at hearings like this. They were working people. Their clothes were clean but worn, and their faces were marked by hardship and abandonment. An elderly African-American man was the first to stand, his hands shaking just slightly as he gripped a worn piece of paper. My name is William Johnson. I'm 73 years old. I'm a Vietnam veteran. 2 tours, a Purple Heart, a Bronze Star. He paused for a moment, and his voice cracking. I've been homeless in Nancy Pelosi's district for 3 years. He held up his Purple Heart, the medal catching the light. I served my country with honor. I came home and built a life. I had a job, a family, a home. Then the rents started to rise. The neighborhood changed. Rich folks moved in, and poor folks were moved out. But I had nowhere left to go. His voice grew stronger now, fueled by a righteous anger. I tried to get help. I called her office dozens of times. I went to that building on Fillmore. It was always closed. I sent letters and got no response. Now, I sleep on the streets. She never even visits the district she abandoned. He looked directly at Pelosi, who seemed completely unable to meet his gaze. You called Major Gabbard a traitor. I served with actual traitors, men who turned their backs on their brothers in the heat of battle. But you're something far worse. You betrayed us during peacetime. You just left us here to rot while you were off sipping wine in Napa. Look at me. The command echoed through the hearing room. Pelosi flinched, but she still couldn't bring herself to meet his gaze. For 22 years, I served this country, he went on. Now, I serve as a warning. This is what Nancy Pelosi's leadership really looks like. This is who she truly represents. The forgotten, the abandoned, the ones stepped over, all on her way to another fundraiser. And others stood with him. There was a small business owner whose shop was destroyed by the crime Pelosi ignored. A teacher from a school that begged for help as its students fled the district in droves. And a mother whose son died from a fentanyl overdose on streets Pelosi never bothered to police. Together, their testimonies painted a harrowing picture of complete abandonment. A district office that existed only on paper, and a representative who knew more about wine vintages than the names of her own constituents. A leader who had simply forgotten the people she was elected to lead. But you haven't completely ignored the district, Tulsi said, as she produced new documents. You've actually been very active in certain areas. Real estate development, for instance. These are city planning documents, and they show your interventions. And every single time, it's the same pattern. Support for luxury developments that price out the long-time residents. She then laid out a timeline of gentrification that correlated perfectly with Pelosi's own real estate investments. You push for development that raises property values, pricing out the poor, and then you buy their properties for cheap when they're forced to sell. You've turned your own constituents into profit centers. Security costs, Tulsi continued, to pulling out another stack of budget documents. You spend $3 million a year on personal security, paid for by taxpayers, yet you voted against funding for the police in your own district. Your constituents have to face crime every single day, while you're protected by what amounts to a small army. She then produced the crime statistics that Pelosi had fought to suppress. Murder is up 300%. Robbery, up 400%. Car break-ins have become so common. People don't even bother reporting them anymore. But you wouldn't know that all the way from Napa, would you? Then, a young woman in the gallery stood up. I'm Jennifer Chen. I was born in your district. My grandparents came here from China with nothing and built a life for themselves. And now I can't afford to live in the same place I grew up. My grandmother's apartment building was bought by a Pelosi family trust and then converted into luxury condos. She died in a nursing home because she had absolutely nowhere else to go. Your San Francisco doesn't exist anymore, Jennifer continued, with tears streaming down her face. You killed it with your greed and your neglect. You represent rich donors, not the real people. You represent property values, not human values. The testimonies kept coming, each one like a dagger to Pelosi's claims of representation. Business owners who were driven out by crime. Families that were priced out by gentrification. Elderly residents who could still remember a time when their representative actually knew their names. 36 years, Tulsi summarized as she closed the folder. 36 years of taking their votes while you were taking their homes. 36 years of claiming to represent them, while living everywhere but among them. You are not their representative. You are their absentee landlord. And now, they are done paying rent on your broken promises. She then reached for the final folder. But abandoning your constituents for profit is almost understandable compared to this. Because what's in this folder isn't just about corruption or neglect. It's about selling American citizenship itself to the highest bidder. The final folder was marked with official Department of Homeland Security stamps, and it had the kind of thickness that suggested a major in-depth investigation. Tulsi opened it with the deliberate gravity of someone about to reveal the culmination of years of hard investigative work. Inside were immigration documents, bank records, and surveillance photos that together painted a picture of corruption so brazen it almost defied belief. The EB-5 visa program, Tulsi began, her voice carrying the full weight of what she was about to reveal. It's also known as the Golden Visa. Invest $500,000 in an American business that creates jobs. You get a green card? It's a legitimate program when it's used properly, but in your hands, it became something else entirely. It became a for sale sign on American citizenship. She produced a set of incorporation documents, spreading them across the table like tarot cards that revealed a dark future. Pelosi Partners Real Estate Development. Pelosi Investment Opportunities, LLC. Golden Gate Visa Investments. Shell companies, every last one of them. But they all lead back to a single source: your husband's real estate empire. Between 2015 and 2023, these exact companies raised $300 million through the EB-5 program. That's $300 million from foreign nationals who were seeking American citizenship. But here's the problem. The jobs that these investments were supposed to create, well, they never materialized. The evidence she then presented was absolutely meticulous. She detailed project after project that existed only on paper. A hotel in Napa that was never even built, but somehow it created 500 jobs. There was a shopping center in San Francisco that was really just a parking lot, yet it claimed to have created 300 jobs. Then there was an office building, already constructed and fully leased, that somehow retroactively created 400 jobs. So, who exactly were these investors? Tulsi went on, pulling out a list that made several members of the committee literally recoil. It included Chinese nationals who were under investigation for corruption back in their home country, Russian oligarchs who were on international sanctions lists, and Iranian businessmen who were using proxies to get around the bans. You weren't just selling visas, she declared. You were selling them directly to America's adversaries. Next, she produced a set of surveillance photos. These are from a meeting at your Napa estate back in October of 2023, she said. Sus, do you recognize the man you're shaking hands with? That's Chen Wei, a man wanted in China for embezzling $50 million from the Chinese military. And now, he's a legal U.S. resident, all thanks to a $500,000 investment in one of your phantom projects. Or, how about this gentleman, she said, showing another photo, Dmitry Vulov, a Russian oligarch with close ties to Putin, who's been sanctioned by the Treasury Department, yet somehow his nephew got a visa through your program. It's curious how that works, isn't it? But here's where it gets truly damaging, Tulsi said, her voice dropping to a serious tone. We didn't just investigate past corruption. We actually ran an active operation. FBI agent Michael Chen. "Would you please stand?" she asked. From the gallery, a man stood up, revealing his FBI badge. He was young, fit, and carried himself like someone who was very comfortable with undercover work. Agent Chen posed as a wealthy Chinese businessman looking for a visa, Tulsi explained. He approached your network just last month. And what happened next was all captured on video. "Would you like to see it, Madam Speaker?" she then asked. Without even waiting for an answer, she played the footage on the screens throughout the hearing room. The quality was excellent. This was FBI surveillance at its absolute finest. It showed Pelosi in what looked like a private dining room. He's sitting right across from Agent Chen, who was playing the part of a desperate billionaire. Agent Chen's accented English was flawless. "Mrs. Pelosi, I need to leave China, and quickly," he began. "There are complications with the authorities back home. I'm prepared to invest a substantial amount for the right kind of assistance." On the video, Pelosi leaned forward, her voice coming through crystal clear. "The standard investment is $500,000, she said. But for expedited processing, and for someone with your complications, we're talking about more." "How much more?" Agent Chen asked. $1 million, in cash, untraceable. Half of it goes to the investment fund, the other half to my charitable foundation. And as she said it, she made actual air quotes around the word charitable. "I can guarantee approval within 30 days, even with you being on certain lists," she said. "I make the lists that matter," she boasted. "So I have judges who owe me favors, and immigration officials who understand what gratitude is. For $1 million, you'll be an American citizen before this Christmas." Then came the most damning moment of all. Pelosi was then seen actually accepting a briefcase, opening it up to reveal stacks and stacks of cash. "Perfect," she said. "Welcome to America, Mr. Chen. Or whatever your real name happens to be. I don't really care, just as long as the money is real." The hearing room absolutely exploded. This wasn't just a simple case of corruption. This was smoking gun evidence, caught right on tape, of bribery, immigration fraud, and a complete abuse of power at the very highest level. "That was just last Tuesday," Tulsi noted calmly. "That $1 million was all marked by the FBI. We've already managed to trace $200,000 of it directly to your husband's accounts, and the rest of it is still being located." She then pulled out even more documents, adding, "But this wasn't just some isolated incident. We have identified 400 at AR-owned visas that were issued through your programs. Out of those, a staggering 312 went to individuals with criminal backgrounds, sanctions violations, or known intelligence connections. You have been running a citizenship for sale operation that would make organized crime envious." "The national security implications," Tulsi continued while producing intelligence assessments, "are absolutely staggering. You've given known Chinese intelligence operatives legal residency in our country. Russian mafia figures are now able to operate freely right here in America. You've got Iranian sanctions busters walking around with American passports. And it's all because they paid you." Then she pulled out a folder of victim statements. "But this isn't just about national security," she said. "These stories are from legitimate immigrants who waited for years, followed every single rule, only to have to watch criminals buy their way to the front of the line. A woman named Maria Gonzalez waited 14 years to bring her mother over from Mexico, legally. Her mother died waiting, all while you were selling visas to sanctioned oligarchs. Amit Patel, a software engineer, waited 9 years for his green card, following every rule and paying every single fee. He had to watch his own son grow up on video calls while you were fast-tracking Russian mobsters for cash. And the evidence just kept mounting. There were bank transfers from offshore accounts, text messages showing coordination for visa approvals, even emails that were threatening immigration judges who wouldn't cooperate. And it revealed a vast network of corruption that had turned American citizenship into a simple commodity. But here's the final piece, Tulsi said, producing a document that made Pelosi's lawyer start frantically whispering in her ear. It was a RICO indictment. That's the Racketeering Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, something usually reserved for mob bosses. But what else would you call someone running a criminal operation that sells American citizenship? The phone at Pelosi's table rang. Her lawyer picked it up, his face turning pale as he listened. He covered the receiver and whispered urgently to Pelosi. "It's Paul. The FBI is at the house. They're arresting him." The microphone picked up Paul Pelosi's panicked voice, coming through the phone. "Nancy, they're here. They have warrants for everything. They're taking the computers. So what do I do?" Pelosi snatched the phone, her carefully crafted composure finally starting to crack. Paul, don't say a word. But the line went dead. Her husband of 61 years was being arrested, and there was nothing she could do to save him. She couldn't even save herself. "Your staff seems to be leaving," Tulsi observed calmly. And sure enough, the seats behind Pelosi were beginning to empty. The aides who had served her for years were quietly gathering their belongings and walking out. Even her communications director, who had been her most loyal soldier, was now heading for the exit. 417 visas sold, Tulsi summarized, $300 million collected. National security compromised. And all of it was captured on tape, documented in records that have been proven beyond any doubt. You didn't just corrupt the system, Madam Speaker. You corrupted the very idea of what it means to be an American citizen. You turned the American dream into the American auction. She closed the final folder, looking at Pelosi with an expression that could almost be described as pity. "You called me a traitor. You claimed I abandoned democratic values. But what values are those exactly? The value of selling citizenship to criminals? The value of getting rich off of insider trading on human misery? The value of abandoning your own constituents while you enrich your family? Those aren't democratic values. They aren't Republican values. They aren't American values. They're the values of a criminal. And your crime spree ends today." The doors to the hearing room swung open with synchronized precision as FBI agents entered in formation, their movements looking professional and practiced. The lead agent, a woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen far too much corruption, were approached with warrants in her hand. The gallery, which had been buzzing with a mixture of shock and outrage, suddenly fell silent as the weight of the moment settled in. "Nancy Patricia Pelosi," the agent announced, her voice carrying the full weight of federal authority, "I have warrants for your arrest on charges of insider trading, racketeering, bribery of federal officials, conspiracy to commit immigration fraud, violation of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and the sale of classified information." Pelosi shot to her feet, her face a mask of indignation that was warring with fear. "I'm the Speaker of the House. You can't." "Former Speaker," the agent corrected calmly. "You resigned that position the moment you became a federal criminal. And yes, we can." "I have congressional immunity," Pelosi protested, grasping for any shield she could find against the inevitable. "Congressional immunity doesn't cover criminal acts," Tulsi interjected quietly. "Nor it never has. You, of all people, should know that. After all, You helped write some of the very laws you've been breaking. The agents moved forward with practiced efficiency. Pelosi's lawyer tried to step in, speaking rapidly about procedures and protocols, but even he seemed to know it was useless. The evidence that had been presented was just too overwhelming, too undeniable. "You can't do this," Pelosi said, her voice cracking as reality finally began to set in. "I've served this country for 36 years. I've been Speaker of the House. You've enriched yourself at the expense of the people you swore an oath to serve." Tulsi interrupted, standing up now, her military bearing on full display. "You called me a traitor, a Russian asset. I served in Iraq while you were committing insider trading. I wore the uniform of this country while you were wearing designer clothes bought with blood money. I took an oath to defend the Constitution, while you used it as toilet paper." She moved closer, her voice dropping but still loud enough for the cameras to hear. "I deployed to a war zone while you were deploying schemes to rob your own constituents. I watched fellow soldiers die for this country, while you sold its secrets for semiconductor stocks. I came home to serve in Congress, while you turned Congress into your own personal ATM. You want to know the difference between us?" Tulsi asked, her voice now rising. "I can look myself in the mirror without seeing a criminal staring back at me. Can you?" As the FBI agents brought out the handcuffs, the gallery erupted. The homeless veterans stood at attention, not for Pelosi, but for Tulsi, offering the salute of one warrior recognizing another. The small business owners who had lost everything began to applaud. Even some of the Democrats in the room couldn't hide their approval that justice was finally being served. "Wait!" Pelosi said desperately, as the handcuffs clicked shut around her wrists. "Your husband Paul is in custody," the lead FBI agent confirmed, "along with 14 other members of your network. Your son, Paul Jr., is cooperating with authorities. He has provided extensive documentation of the family's operations." The betrayal in Pelosi's eyes was absolute. Her son, the one who ran from the hearing room, had chosen to save himself instead of his family. The dynasty she'd spent decades building was now eating itself alive. As they led her past the witness table, Pelosi made one last attempt at defiance. "This isn't over. My attorneys will." "Your attorneys are going to be very busy," an FBI agent noted. "We've frozen all assets pending forfeiture proceedings. That includes the accounts you thought were hidden. All $347 million worth. The number staggered even those who had sat through the evidence. $347 million, accumulated through decades of corruption. Tulsi watched as they led Pelosi away, her gaze steady, but not triumphant. This wasn't a moment for celebration, but for reflection. As the former speaker was marched past the gallery, she had to face the people she had failed, the veterans she had abandoned, the business owners she had destroyed, the constituents she had forgotten. William Johnson, the homeless veteran, stood ramrod straight as she passed. "Now you know what accountability looks like," he said quietly. "Soon now you know what justice feels like. Welcome to our world." The last image captured by the cameras was profound in its symbolism. Nancy Pelosi, who had wielded the speaker's gavel with imperial authority, was led out in handcuffs while her victims stood as witnesses. Behind her, the speaker's chair sat empty, her nameplate already removed by maintenance staff with remarkable efficiency. Tulsi turned to address the committee and cameras one final time. "So what happened here today wasn't about politics. It wasn't about parties or ideologies. It was about truth. For too long, we've allowed corruption to hide behind political power. For too long, We've accepted that those who make the laws are above them. She picked up one of the folders, then set it down again. Nancy Pelosi called me a traitor because I wouldn't play the game, not because I wouldn't stay quiet about corruption. Because I put principle over party. If that makes me a traitor to her version of politics, I accept that label with pride. But the real traitors, she continued, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had faced actual enemies, are those who betray the public trust, who turn service into self-service, who see constituents as subjects to be ruled rather than citizens to be served. Today, not one of those traitors was exposed. But she's not alone. The corruption runs deep, crosses party lines, infects every level of government. What happened today is just the beginning. The American people deserve better. They deserve representatives who actually represent them, not their own bank accounts. As Tulsi gathered her folders and prepared to leave, reporters shouted questions. She paused at the door, looking back at the chaos she had methodically created. "Yes, you want to drain the swamp?" she asked the room. "This is what it looks like." Not tweets or slogans or political theater. Evidence, truth, accountability, justice. The swamp isn't a place, it's a system. And today, we pulled one very large, very corrupt plug. She walked out with the same steady pace she had entered, leaving behind a hearing room in chaos, a political dynasty in ruins, and a message that resonated far beyond Washington. No one is above the law, not even the Speaker of the House. In the aftermath, the political earthquake was immediate and devastating. Pelosi's network began unraveling like a cheap sweater. Dozens of co-conspirators rushed to make deals. Financial records spanning decades were seized. The Visa for Sale program was exposed in full, leading to the revocation of hundreds of illegally obtained citizenships. But perhaps the most lasting image was of the homeless veterans, the abandoned constituents, and the forgotten Americans who had finally been heard. They stood in the gallery long after Pelosi was gone, some crying, some praying, all understanding that while justice delayed is justice denied, sometimes, just sometimes, justice delayed is still justice delivered. The dynasty had fallen. The Speaker's reign was over. And in a small courthouse in San Francisco, the victims of Nancy Pelosi's 36-year corruption spree began filing lawsuits to reclaim what had been stolen from them. When the swamp had one less alligator, but as Tulsi had warned, there were many more to